welcome to Inspire Care 360's webinar featuring guest Neal Foard. We are very excited to have him on today. My name is Nicole Farkas with Inspire Care 360, and we would love to have you mention in the chat who you are, where you're from, and we absolutely encourage questions today. We are so excited and very fortunate to have this exceptional speaker on today. Like I mentioned, Neal Foard. He's going to be talking about the impact that you have to connecting with your team, not only the staff, but the directors and everyone. If you haven't had a chance to check out his YouTube videos, let me tell you, they are amazing stories. And he will actually show you that we all are superheroes and have superpowers that I probably guarantee you didn't even know you have. And a big part of that is when people love you, that is your superpower. I'm going to warn you, some of these stories are going to make you laugh. Some may actually make you tear up, so grab some tissues. But he's got some phenomenal stories that he's going to be sharing with us today. And we are so lucky to have him be a participant. So let's see, who do we have on today? We have Kimberly, welcome from one of our Inspire centers here. And let's see, joining from, well, we've got our own Sarah joining from Asheville, North Carolina. Sarah, hello. We've got Jennifer from Texas. Also, throughout the webinar, please feel free to not only use the chat. Harry, hello from Stone Mountain. Not only to use the chat button, but please feel free at the bottom of the screen. There's a Q&A area, so please ask questions. We will do our best to get them answered for you, and not only by Tony, but also by Neal. And if we do not get to them, we will make sure that we eventually get to them. Hello, Robin from Pennsylvania. Welcome. We're excited to have you all on board today. And I think that this is going to be a webinar that you will never forget. So again, for those just joining, my name is Nicole Farkas with Inspire Care 360. I will be your MC for the event today. I will do my best to get to everybody for questions and comments and whatnot, and direct them to who they need to go. My associate Sarah, part of our team here, will also be posting links to, if you needed to get to certain spaces or areas, like, for example, for his YouTube videos. Jennifer from Georgia, welcome. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. And excuse me. So I believe that you're going to really enjoy some of his stories, and it's going to be, associated with a lot of the ECE industry and some of the topics that we're going to be discussing today, which we are excited about, is creating an effective and collaborative partnership between owners and directors and employees, the importance of establishing shared vision and culture of the success. Something that we all look for is strategies for motivating our employees, encouraging them to have a sense of ownership within your schools and your centers. So we're really excited to have this again. We definitely encourage the Q&A, ask your questions, because this is what this webinar is for you, and we look forward. Again, my name is Nicole Farkas. I'm a membership advocate with Inspire Care 360 and will be your MC for the day. My email is there. I will also post it in the chat if you need anything. So today our agenda is we're going to cover welcoming everybody, some introductions to who's here, a little housekeeping, some discussions. If we have time at the very end, we will tackle Q&A, but again, please definitely put some questions in the Q&A area. And Tony will be discussing a little bit about Inspire Care 360 and what we are about. So I mentioned Tony a couple times, you may or may not know, but he is our fearless leader, the founder and CEO of Childcare 360. Thank you, Tony, and Sarah for putting this great webinar together. We're really excited. And I know personally I'm excited. So I'm going to toss it over to you. So thank you.
Nicole, thank you so much. Fearless leader, I'm not exactly sure. Plenty of people go around for everybody. So thank you so much, Nicole. You do always a wonderful job of emceeing and getting the people connected here. I know that we're going to continue to have people who will be joining us over the next few minutes. We know that unfortunately we can't have everybody jump on at the very same time. But with that said, we are now both doing replays as well as which replay goes through a little bit of production after this, as well as after that, we also will be now creating for all of our webinars, they're becoming podcasts. So as that comes about, likely you will start to see an email coming out in the near future that will say where our podcast channel is. And I believe the title is going to be Caring for Child Care Owner and Operators, because if that's sort of really what Childcare 360 is attempting to do, is to really demonstrate that the owners, the operators, it can be lonely at times in owning and operating these schools. There's a lot going on. We have a bunch of staff, we have people coming and going, but as owner and operators, unless you're you're in it, it's hard to sometimes understand our challenges, what our opportunities are, but what our struggles are, what our fears are. Sort of like when she was saying fearless, I'm not going to agree with that again, but I think the high compliment from her. I do want to give also credit to Sarah, who is our marketing person, who does pull a lot of these things together on the back end, and she's just been amazing, loving Sarah to death on a lot of the work that she does. But with that said, no further ado, let's start moving forward here. All of our certificates, for those of you who are attending and are seeking a continuing education unit credit, we do provide that. So if you're seeking that CEU, please reach out, and here is the address. You will get it sent to you via Sarah. She'll send this to you in the chat. So please do not hesitate to request that. And we'll also have this again at the end of our webinar. Today, our special guest, which we're going to talk more about in a few minutes, is Neal Foard. And I will be getting into sort of how I had an opportunity to meet Neal, as well as getting him on board then to talk to us a little bit and for us to have a shared discussion about things I think that really can relate to our industry. With that said, let's move forward, and we're going to talk to you about two different items. One is this past week, we have rolled out what is called peak performance. Quite often, a lot of people are like, well, what is peak performance? What do you have to have? Well, if you're an Childcare 360 member, you have a platform called Inspire University that helps you deliver all of your content, whether it be learning, whether it be video, audio, documents, agreements, any of those things. You have the ability to leverage all that with Inspire University. On top of it, we've now layered a very powerful application for all of our members at no additional cost, just as part of what we do to really help identify, support a whole performance management structure for your organization. We run around like crazy in our industry, trying to hire and recruit, bring the best people in, to bring them in there so we can produce the most amazing kids for the next generation. We have significant turnover, whether we like it or not. We also have opportunities where we can bring more kids into the classroom, yet we have wait lists because we can't find enough staff. So part of this initiative is really about, why do people come to us? Why do they stay? And why do they leave? Those are actually some of the topics we'll be talking about today, by the way. And to help with that, Childcare 360 over the past 2 years developed peak performance. We see that in the far upper left-hand corner, many schools have staff that sort of lack expectation. People come in, they get put into a classroom. We really haven't had the time. And it's not because we don't want to do this. It's not that we're not educated to do this. It's our schools. We're just so busy that oftentimes we don't have the time to set expectations, clear expectations for our staff, to really help them get trained. You know, they're teachers. They just absolutely love learning and development. And then how they actually get connected one another, that cohesiveness that really creates a culture. So many of our schools out there lack that ability to develop a culture. There are still many more too have really started to go down the path to becoming engaged. They are getting some of the basic training. They're getting their foundational training, of course, for their continuing education. They do have some expectations of what they should be doing, maybe to their program room or the like. And then they do have some mentoring that's going on. Our objective really is to help them get every person, whether they've been there for 16 years, for 6 months, for 6 weeks, that they have a real uniform opportunity to be and work with each other in concert with one another, to act like a team, to demonstrate that they all understand the values that is the foundation of your school, as well as what is important to how they conduct themselves, how they engage with other staff members, with administration, but with the families too. So that goes through a lot of training that we offer, as well as practical opportunities for them to apply their knowledge on the job and demonstrate quicker, sooner, faster that they are offering value and they're aligned with everybody else in your school, which then really aligns your performance and aligns your culture. This is peak performance. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but what it really is it's automating, it's systematizing, it's taking the burden off of administration to have to always do this. Let's set clear, big expectations up front, then have a 6-month review and hope in between things go well, and then hope until 12 months into another review. And quite oftentimes, we don't even get to go through those reviews. So peak performance is super cool, I think, in the way that we put this together. It is taking burden off of administration, and it's giving more opportunity to your teammates. If you want to learn more about it, reach out to Nicole, and she'll be happy to talk to you about peak performance. Further, we also have recently developed another ebook. We have a series of ebooks that come out. We have about one ebook that we publish every 2 months. We're huge believers that high tides raise all ships in this industry. So with our webinars, with our ebooks, with the kind of materials we try to put out there, you know, a lot of it comes across as, well, they do a lot of work for free. Obviously, you know, does it benefit Inspire Care 360? We think so. We hope you see us that we're invested to making a better industry. And in turn, that's why we hopefully bring on our members. We also see that there's opportunity to give back. And we do that through our ebooks too. So in this ebook that has just come out, this is Unlock Your Potential, a guide to transforming managers to leaders. We have a unique thing that goes on in our industry, and that is that quite often our first level administrators who come from being like an assistant teacher or to a teacher, and then eventually they become an assistant director as to a director, if they can make the leap according to your state, according to the license regs and everything in between. The opportunity with that is great, that you've brought someone who's worked within your system along wonderfully. The challenge with it is they oftentimes don't have a business background, or they don't have management training. They certainly don't have a lot of leadership training. There's a difference between management and leadership. Quite often they learn just by observing how to tell other people what to do, tell them that this is their schedule, tell them how to do different work. And people get very burned, and it can be very frustrating for our directors, our administrators, and our owners. And it really looks at how do we help them evolve really to leaders. And as a leader is different really than management. Management is really about going after and telling. Leaders are about creating empowerment within your team, creating empowerment with your staff, and then in turn, allowing them to understand that they're accountable for the decisions they make. And you, who may be an owner who has managers or directors or teammates that are implementing things like this to become a leader, you help hold them accountable to get to the next level. So you're working more as a coach, and they are working more as a coach to the teammates. Instead of solving everybody's problem for them, they are coaching individuals so they can solve their own problems and their own issues. We go through a lot of that in this ebook that I wrote, and it is a real opportunity for you folks to download this for free and hopefully take a few minutes. It's a relatively quick read. You probably could read the whole thing within 10 minutes. And it is a series that we have others out there, but I hopefully you find this as an opportunistic for yourself. With that said, let's move forward. Let's jump in and let me bring on Neal. Now, Neal, let's see here if I can get you on, because I think I had shut off your video for you. So I need to bring your video back on for you. And there we go. So there he is.
Out of the green room.
There you go. How are you doing today?
Doing great. It's really nice to be on. Your audience doesn't know we've had conversations before, quite long ones, and I've always enjoyed them.
Well, it's wonderful. And it's always funny too, because we always go through this sort of false thing of like, how are you? It's nice to see you, Neal. We were on a call earlier today, and we're always like, okay, is your technology right? Is my technology right? You know, so, but I'm absolutely thrilled to have you on. You know, it's one of those things that we look at different social media today, and how I got to meet Neal is just very much of seeing something out on social media in the new way that creators are available. Just, you know, one of the major benefits, we obviously know there's a lot of take backs from what social media has offered us, where we're like, oh, social media is not helping us. One of the areas that I think is tremendously helping us in is it looks at our entire world, our entire population as individuals who can create and bring content, bring ideas, all these different things. And while I was out there, be very candid, it was on TikTok, and this gentleman popped up. And when he popped up, it was just this background, which you can actually see that black background behind him. And he had this just wonderful voice, and someone actually asked already as a question, Neal, which we'll have to do. Is that your real voice? And I'm like, it is his voice.
It's my father's voice. It's my father's voice.
He got it somewhere. And so I started listening to, he started just telling stories. Well, first thing I noticed right out of the gate is his voice is very soothing. And I don't mean to embarrass you or anything, but I'm just like, it's very peaceful. It's very easy to listen to. And there's sometimes you hear people talking and you're like, okay, what's their angle? This just draws you in. And the stories he started talking about and talking through, and if you haven't had a chance, we're going to send out this link to you over here, if it hasn't already been, where you have an opportunity to view many of Neal's videos. And I started listening to videos, and I got a chuckle out of a few of them, but then I started hearing some ones that were really impactful, to the point where I actually started tearing up myself. And I was like, wow, it just really hit home. And as I started thinking about it, I was like, there's some magic that there is about being able to be a storyteller. There's magic in there, and we know that, you know, as we look back within the ages of, you know, every time they show a movie of the past, you know, whether it be with Native American tribes or even back to Stone Age days or what have you, that, you know, any type of, you know, first man, we're sitting around a campfire and people are telling stories. So Neal, you know, welcome to here. But you impressed me with your storytelling, and I'd love to have just a little story up front of how you just decided this is something that, you know, was a good fit for you, and you decided to move forward, and this is where you want to develop some content.
So there's sort of two angles to that. The first is that I came from the creative side of the advertising industry, where it was my job to persuade people to favor a brand or a product, and that we were being paid to cheerlead for. And I developed a kind of, you know, I did my 10,000 hours of trying to talk people into stuff. And what happened was I would sometimes tell stories of my father to friends, and they said, "Oh, that's the sort of thing that your children should hear." One of my sisters said, "It's such a shame that our dad never got to meet our kids." And it really was, because he would have loved my son and my daughter, and they would have loved him. He was a very gentle man of moderation. And so I figured that what I would do is I would create a kind of record, if you will, of all of the things that I remember about my dad. And then that wound up expanding into more and more stories just from my own life, so that someday, should my children have kids of their own and I'm not here to meet them, they would know who I was. And the very first story that really sort of got the ball rolling was my father and I, when I was about 9 years old. That would have been in 1969. People think now that the country is more divided than it has ever been, but they may not recall, or you may not be old enough to remember, that back in 1969, the country had lost its mind. Political assassination was a thing. They'd killed John F. Kennedy and they'd shot Robert Kennedy. They'd killed Martin Luther King Jr. They'd killed Malcolm X. There was the Manson family and the Zodiac killer, and the Vietnam War was tearing the country apart. And people don't remember that. And what was happening is my father, who had grown up in the Depression, well, his faith in humanity was just at a low ebb. And one summer we were driving from Los Angeles to Oakland, just the two of us, and I was 9, and our car broke down south of Bakersfield. And this was back before cell phones. So there was no way we were going to be able to summon help from the ether. There were none of these call boxes at the side of the road. So there we were stuck. We were going to have to hoof it into Bakersfield, which looked like it was about 8 miles, with a gas can or something, and so along comes this cowboy in a flatbed. Looks like he's about 25 years old. And he says, "Hey, fellas, you guys need some help?" And so my father was very suspicious. This was like I say, this was the era of the Manson family. And he couldn't imagine anybody being nice enough to just stop and help out. And he said to this young guy, goes, "Well, listen, I can't pay you. All I got is this dang Chevron card. I don't have any cash." The guy goes, "Well, I wasn't going to charge you." So he manages to hook our car to his truck with some electrical conduit, back when, steel bumpers on cars were a thing. And we rolled on into Bakersfield, and he literally waits for this guy, this mechanic friend of his, to come out of church. And he comes rolling out with the bolo tie on, and they have put us up on the jack. And my father's saying to this guy, "Hey, no, listen, I can't pay you for this service." The guy's, "Well, we'll work something out." And then they discover they don't have the part. So the water pump, they have to go get from a Napa parts store owner. So they get this guy out of his house on a Sunday morning in the middle of summer. So he comes down, and my father says, okay, everybody's got to stop here for a second. You need to remember, I cannot pay you. All I have is this Chevron card. And they're all looking at him like, wow, you really don't trust anybody. So the young cowboy says, "Look, if it'd make you feel better, I got a bunch of watermelons I got to get loaded off a rail spur, and it's kind of hot work. So if you guys will help me, it's a couple, 3 hours worth of work. If you'll help me do that, I'll pay for the part at least, and then we'll work the rest of it out." So my father says, okay, good. So he and I are helping unload these watermelons off a rail spur. It's about 140 degrees in that rail car, and we are sweating like mules. But my dad is whistling because it's so great that we've got an opportunity to make good on this. So after about 2.5 hours of this work, up comes the car just running like a top. And we are, really just pitted out. And, we're all getting ready to go. And my dad says to these young guys, "Listen, I really don't know how to thank you fellas for this good turn. We'll make sure to, send you some money." Well, we're turning to go, and the mechanic says, whoa, where do you think you're going?" And you could see my father's face, all the fear and distrust just went right up to the surface, and he stiffened like a leopard. And they all could read his body language. They go, "Wait, no, it's my wife is going to make us all Sunday dinner. So if you guys want to just stop and maybe catch a shower, we'll give you some clean shirts for the rest of the trip. We can have dinner." And so we all go over to have Sunday dinner at this beautiful little house, and we're in the backyard with the picnic tables and the gingham, tablecloths, and it's fried chicken from the chicken right over there, and corn on the cob from the corn up the road, and biscuits and gravy. And at 9, I had my first taste of beer, because they had the old Budweisers, with the where you had to tap them with the church key. And my father I kept looking over at him, and he would shake his head like he was so ashamed for having assumed the worst about these people. And we had this, I will never have a meal that good ever again. Well, so we get on the road, and my dad maybe didn't say 3 words the rest of the way. But we finally got back to Oakland, and it's time for bed. And I get into bed, and I'm just about to turn off my light, and my father appears in the doorway. And he goes, "Hey, listen, no matter what you read in the papers or what you see in the movies or you see on TV or on the radio, you listen to me. That's how people really are." And about a month later, Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, and his faith in humanity had been restored. Well, I wanted the kids to hear that story, and in a way where I could still tell it. I don't want to wait till I was 85 and was kind of missing details. So it turned out that when I posted that story on TikTok, a lot of people liked what that said about us. And I got from every end of the political spectrum, I got people telling me, "Wow, that really improved my day. That really is true. That's how people really are. If you just don't flame them up and make them angry about everything, they're actually pretty cool. And Americans are a lot more generous and easygoing than we have a reputation for."
Yeah.
So,
And, Neal, it was one of those, you told that story on one of the TikToks, so it is out there in the ether.
yeah.
And it is one of those that really hooked me into sort of your level of conversation. And I think the reason, not so much just because of you and your ability to hook in that level of conversation, but I think it's because of the ability to relate. I think we all, I got a feeling you and I, if we spent enough time together, we'd be drinking a diner dry of coffee.
Pretty much.
Because I just really have enjoyed our conversations. But one of the things that you start realizing, you start looking at elements about life, and you start looking at like the story that you just told there. It is the fact that all the influences that we have around us start to manipulate us sometimes away from who the person inside really is. And I think what you had there is you had your father who has very strong ethics, right? Because he's like, I don't want to get anything for free without paying for it on one hand, but he also has this caution, this wall, this guard up. And you see what his approach is, but as well as with the communities. But I love the part of it is your observation of it. You're going through life as a 9-year-old, and you're able to even process back then what like an amazing little story that is. So what was the first reaction when you started realizing, I'm not sure if you went viral, but I assume that it got a lot of looks.
Yeah, that one.
Your response
that one did. So I'll tell you a quick story about that, which is my sister Trish gave me a call, and she very cynically, she goes, "Hey, how you doing?" I go, "Oh, good." She goes, "3 times today, people have sent me your stupid video and said, you really should see this young man. He has the most wonderful thing to say. Trish, I think you would really like this." And she goes, "They don't know you're my brother."
Sounds so much like a sister.
And what was so fabulous about that was she's trying to break balls there, but the truth is I could hear the affection in her voice because she knew that story too. She knew all about, we had the same dad. And I just love, the only better reaction I ever got what besides that, your own sister calling you up and saying, hey, people are sending me your video because they don't know you know me, right? Okay. The only better that was better was I posted another video that got a lot of hits, like over 1 million hits. And my daughter was at a fraternity party, and she's 22. She was at a fraternity party, and she was meeting some young guy from UC Irvine who said he was a communications major. And she said, oh, you're a comms major. It's like, what do you like to, take in for your, media? And he goes, oh, I love TikTok. I ran across this guy that I just love. And he name dropped me to her. And that was when I thought, well, you can kill me now, because it's never going to get better than your 22-year-old daughter going,
Actually,
some frat guy, right? Some frat guy thinks he's cool. So it's like, now I'm not gonna overplay that. I'm just gonna say that's really good. But
I know I've got kids who are in their early 20s, and if they were to hear it from one of their peers that
right,
their father was some kind of rock
right,
star out there,
right,
they'd be
exactly.
like,
They go, Tony D'Agostino, he is a great manager. You could learn a lot from this guy. Oh God, don't tell me about Dad.
She was probably nothing to a little bit, but it's awesome.
But I will say this, that here's the main feedback that I get that I find incredibly empowering. And that is that, when you feed good things into the space, when you try to say, listen, it's not all bad. People are actually pretty cool. And what's more, if you just listen to the logic of it, you'll get it. So for example, there are 1,000 small courtesies that people do for you during the day. They'll open doors for you, or they'll let you go ahead of them in the line at the supermarket, or, just these little things, even if it's just a smile, or if it's you let somebody into traffic and they give you a wave, or they'll flick the wiper on the rear window, and they're thanking you. And those little things are a lot more common than you might think. And especially at work, we don't realize the grace that people are giving us at work, and the latitude they're giving, or the favors that they're doing, or the support that and the reason they don't notice them is because it's so common. And
Right.
So what people need to remember is these things are a lot more common than bad things, and good people outnumber bad people by a lot. And the trouble is, it only takes one or two kind of nasty people to kind of ruin your day. But you got to remember, we outnumber the bad people a lot. And there's something else too, which is we're fully capable of being that nasty jerk.
Yeah.
I did it a couple of days ago. I was so ashamed of myself. I got pissy with the guy at the lockers in the gym, and I shouldn't have. And it rode me for 2 days until I apologized. I literally had to go seek him out. And it wasn't because he was a good dude and I had to make sure that he didn't feel bad. It was because I was dying inside, knowing that I'd been that way. So in any case, I'm getting so much feedback, Tony, so much feedback from people who find it reassuring that the stories 90% of the time are about good things that people have done for each other.
Well, and that brings us into, we have 3 different topics that you and I are going to try to get through, and whether we get through them all or not, I hope we can. But I think it's good conversation. The first one is about a social contract, and in a way, we're starting to talk about that, because right now we're putting up with things, and we always think of the present of, oh, how great the past was. Sort of like how you talk about, oh, wait, back in the late 60s, it was crazier than it was now.
Yeah,
Okay.
It was.
And I do remember that. I remember, gosh, I think you got a year or two on me, not much, but you got a year or two on me. But I do remember clearly myself, like I didn't want to even walk to school because of the whole Manson family thing. I was like, scared out of my wits back then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But a lot of those things that come about is you don't realize that it's such a small entity within an entire country, an entire world. But when we look at sort of the standards, and when we think about what we call a social contract, that's sort of the standards we sort of live by. That we've sort of had this, it's an unwritten agreement, right? It's a means that we sort of enjoy life by. Like they say is, when you have a classroom and someone asks a question, immediately someone raises their hand. That's your social agreement that, hey, that person I'm going to first, they raise their hand first. That's your social contract. When we look at the kind of things that go on within our schools today, which I know you don't have sort of the background of the childcare industry as much, but we look at today and it's crazy because we have staff members who literally will go through an interviewing process. They'll be with us for 4 hours. They'll sign all the paperwork. They'll do all this stuff, do background checks. And then the first day of work, they don't show up. They're like, well, wait a minute. Why did you spend a half day? Why did you spend an entire day doing everything? Or you'll have another individual who will show up and, maybe 3-4 days later, they go out on break and they just don't come back. Or you have situations where people one day seem like they're doing fine, and next thing you know, their mind is no longer as part of the business and they've disappeared. And we've had this whole like ghosting issue, the great resignations, all those different elements are starting to happen. The quick thing is to do is blame the generation, right? That millennial generation, that Gen Z generation, and I'm sure everybody said about us Gen Xers and, baby boomers and what have you back then. When you think about how we look at today, and we look at the relationships with people that we work with all the time, how do you try to do that where you look at pulling the good as to looking at all those different elements that can really drag you down, drag your excitement to go into work, pop out of bed in the morning? How do you personally look at that where you're like, this is how I try to, I want to get there. I might not always be there, but I try to get to more of a positive place.
There's, I wonder if I could, I'm going to try and benefit your audience slightly by going quickly to something tactical when it comes to their own stories. There's this wonderful quote from Yuval Harari, the author of, I can't remember, Homo Deus. Yuval Harari says, the most important stories we tell are the ones we tell ourselves about ourselves. And the implication of the quote is, if you believe that you are a good person, that you are a worthwhile person, and you keep telling yourself, I intend to be a good person, I intend to go out into the world, and I intend to do good things. I may not always succeed, but it is my intention to go out in the world and achieve great things on behalf of other people. You will discover that that vibe, your vibration that you said, man, I hate using that word, but let's face it. I mean, that the indication of your intention out into the world of doing good things and helping people is infectious, and it affects other people. So I want to talk about a technique that they use at Pixar when it comes to storytelling, which is they say people admire characters for trying more than for their success. And there's a reason why I believe that anybody that is in your cohort that's listening today, if they're going to be telling a story, they must never make themselves the hero of the story. And the reason they shouldn't make themselves the hero, the person who triumphs, the person who did the great thing, is that by implication, when you brag about yourself, you are trying to set yourself apart and above everybody that's listening to you. And you're not going to get a response from people where they're going to stick around because their intention is to make you bigger and better. They're going to stick around because they think that if I stay here, if I work here, great things will happen for all of us. And so the Pixar stories will always have, even if somebody triumphs, they do so in a circumstance where it's teamwork and it's togetherness, and they're achieving great things, not for their own aggrandizement, but because they've learned that by helping others, that's where they draw their sense of success. And so I had the great bosses that I've had always had a kind of underlying philosophy that I want to leave these people better than I found them. And then I've had bad bosses. I had a boss literally say to me and to a group of about 4 or 5 of us, oh my God, the quote was, I'm already rich. Your job is to make me famous. Now let me ask you, Tony, how hard do you think I'm going to work on that assignment?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
you know what? I do need to add an extra yacht to your portfolio though, Neal. So
no, but yeah. So look, I had this boss. He was a great boss, and his whole notion was, I want to leave people better than I found them. Well, what happens, of course, is that they find themselves loving him to the point where they'll do anything for him, because they know that in the end, the social contract is that if I take care of Scott, Scott starts the whole thing rolling. He's the one who's going to take care of you first. So naturally, you want to take care of him. Why do people love dogs? Because dogs love you first. Dogs don't look at you and wonder if they could have done better. You know?
no,
And so people just love dogs because they know they're going to get it back. Well, I do believe that our first obligation is to try to leave our teams better than we found them. And when you go in with that orientation, and that's the story you tell, like, hey, can I explain why we're all doing what we're doing? Can I tell you where we get our most satisfaction? Let's talk about what we're going to try to achieve this year and how you figure into this and what role you play. And you know, people often, I think human beings, there seems to be this kind of, there's a kind of fashion right now in that very successful people love to brag about their success. And they don't seem to absorb that the truly great leaders are the ones who accommodate their teams. When you look back, say, for example, at Dwight Eisenhower, when he, you know, who was responsible for D-Day, Dwight Eisenhower's great skill was not as a military strategist. It was in his ability to manage and cohere groups of different people. He was famous for his ability to take egomaniacs like George Patton and Montgomery and make them play nice. And this was a really significant talent that George Marshall, the head of the Army, said, I need somebody who's really good at keeping this team as a team, because, you know, I can't have people disobeying orders in order to accomplish things that they can put their names on. Great leaders help teams cohere. There's a wonderful phrase that I just caught yesterday. I had put it on the back of like a candy wrapper, and I found it in a book that I pulled out.
Wow.
It was that that organizations tend to think of their team like bricks. But when you want to build a wall, what's important is the mortar. And that mortar, I believe, is the sense of a mission that is worthwhile, and making sure that people get appropriate respect for their part in it. And so when we are telling the story of what we do, we cannot think of ourselves as being the most important thing here. We've got to say, my job as a leader is to be certain that people feel good about the role they play in this important work and are recognized for that and celebrated for that. Hence, my first statement, which was, when you are telling a story, please, God, don't make yourself the hero of the story. You can be the observer. You can be the one that learns something. You can be the one that is watching while somebody else does something really admirable. And by doing so, people will get a subsonic impression that you care very deeply about the people that work for you. And you know, there's no faster way to make somebody love you than you love them first.
Well, and I think that's I love that. I love the way you're going with that and how that's stated, because if you think about it, this is about how to connect with people. And quite oftentimes we have a challenge because we're always trying to bring people, and we're trying to develop a culture based on values, culture based on principles, the culture that you want to actually go and enjoy every day with your teammates. And if you think about it, if you come out of the gate like you're saying, and the first thing you do is differentiate and separate yourself of, I'm up here, you're down here, maybe one day you'll get up here, you've done the most to put on two totally different paths, your team and yourself. When you start talking about these are the challenges we're dealing with, and this is how we're trying to get there, and I look forward to your input. I'd love to know what your thoughts are, getting them engaged, that you're this team shoulder to shoulder where you're walking into battle together. And the way you're going to do it is because each person is going to try to figure it out their way and generate this energy jointly as to serving one person. There's a lot to be said on how you can connect with people. That leads us really into the second one, and that's about belonging. When we think about why people want to be part of an organization, it's like, I've mentioned this before in other, podcasts and the like and webinars. People love to be part of fraternities. They like to go be part of clubs. Why do they go though, become part of gangs? It's because they have a common thread with those other people that they're with. They're on a common journey. Yeah. And what you're just starting to talk about really is sort of that foundation of creating that journey together.
Yeah, there's the sense of belonging is perhaps the third most important thing. Well, maybe it's the most important thing that people are looking for in their lives, whether they are able to articulate it or not. By belonging to something, you feel safe. In numbers, there is safety. And so it's a very instinctive drive to be surrounded by friendlies. I want, it's funny. I came from the creative side of the advertising industry, where it's my job to persuade people, right? And so for 3 decades, I studied and practiced the art of persuasion. And I used to teach this course at Saatchi & Saatchi on a global level. And I would go into the audience. I would say, first, I want you to understand how important what I'm about to tell you is. So I'm going to pretend now I'm a magic genie. Okay, you have to, and I'm going to give you one of 4 superpowers I'm going to grant you, right? So here are your choices. You just have to pick one. First, super strength. I can make you so strong you can pick up rail cars like they're styrofoam. Okay. Second, the power of flight. You can leap into the sky at will and fly as fast as a jet. Third, invisibility. I could grant you the power to disappear at will and walk amongst the rest of us completely unobserved. Or 4, there's nothing physically, no impressive physical talent, but you have the ability to change people's minds. Which of these superpowers would you pick? If you had the ability to change people's minds, you would not need the other superpowers. Because anything you want, anyone you want, anywhere you want to go, it's simply a matter of asking. People in teams are capable of anything. The Great Wall, the pyramids, the Eiffel Tower, a company like Apple. When people cooperate, it is the greatest of the superpowers. The greatest talent human beings have, the thing that makes us so fearsome, so incredibly amazing, is our ability to cooperate. Our language has given us essentially psychic powers. We become a hive mind. None of us is as smart as all of us together. And this talent of being able to help people feel like they belong is so powerful. It will make them want to help you. Yeah. When you can make somebody feel like they're part of something and not, have you ever heard this, Tony? Somebody comes into a room and they want to congratulate a team for having done something. And they'll say this, they'll go, I want to thank each and every one of you. That is the most nutritionless, it's calories with no nutrition. Sure. Oh, really? You want to thank each and every one of us? Well, I tell you what, Barry, how about you thank each and every one of us? Tell me what Tony did. Tell me what Sarah did. Explain to people how, without asking for credit, did this. Okay, if you do that, if you go into a room and you recognize, hey, I'm not just talking about it. I want you to know I noticed. I want you to know that I was paying attention. And if you do that, if you get specific and you actually mention people by name, you will broadcast to everyone else in the room, oh, if I do something outstanding, it's likely to get rewarded. And, psychic rewards go a long way. And I don't mean everybody gets a trophy. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying, you've heard this term, the Pygmalion effect, PYG. Pygmalion effect is that people live up to your expectations for them. So if you say run a police department and you expect that your officers are going to serve and protect, and they're not going to engage in any kind of shenanigans, and you set a very high level for the professionalism of that department, they're going to live up to it. And the same is true of soldiers. The same is true of athletes. When you set an expectation, you are going to achieve a certain academic level of performance, and that is what I expect. And you will be held responsible for doing that. They will do what you ask them to do. And they'll take a particular pride in having accomplished it. And then the organization becomes self-policing, because once everybody is accustomed to these are our standards, and then somebody rolls in and it's slovenly about the standards, you don't even have to say anything. The team will bust them on that kind of, we do not do that here. And this is all a matter of the story that you tell your organization. And that by setting a standard and requiring people to live up to a certain level of expectation, you make it more friendly for people. You make it a nicer place to work when you have standards.
The story it's interesting because in a way, I've had this going on with one of my schools, and we've had a situation where one of our leaders, who is very strong in many areas, she's just absolutely wonderful. I have a tremendous amount of respect for her. But she had a period of time where she was sort of letting everybody sort of do what they wanted to do. And the standards, unbeknownst to her, were sort of being compromised because she didn't recognize that with that strength of why everybody was there because we talked about belonging on one hand here. Belonging is you all have sort of this, you want to be on the same journey. But similar to like if you've ever had that experience where you're with a group of people and all of a sudden you're there because you're like, yeah, I want to be on this journey. Whether you want to be like, oh, let's all go to a rock show together because we all love this one band and blah, blah, blah. But then there's one individual who doesn't maintain the decorum. They're like all of a sudden they start, you could tell they're sort of pulling everybody apart or they're pulling themselves away. And what they're actually doing is they're actually taking away even that small little culture you developed to go tailgate and then go watch a great show. They've actually started to pull that all apart because they don't have a desire to be on the same path with everybody else. They are, they're blowing that agreement, that social contract. They're not creating that same standard. They're not living to that standard we've all sort of agreed to. It's a challenging thing, but the opportunity there is to be very explicit with what's important to that group, of why belonging to that group is important. That's what I'm hearing you say, at least. Maybe I'm misinterpreting well.
No, absolutely. I do have to say that our first obligation as the member of any team, and particularly if you are the leader of a team, our first obligation is to understand that whatever achievements we have achieved, we owe a tremendous amount to good fortune. So, for example, if you're a very, very smart person, well, chances are you had the benefit of some smart parents. So your intelligence is, by and large, it's an accident of birth. And likewise, not everybody, even if you say, well, yes, but I worked very, very hard for my academic achievements. Yeah, okay, I accept that. That's good for you. But not everybody had your same access to education or your support network. And not everybody is as good looking as you are, nor were they born with your talents. I had a very impatient friend who would frequently use the phrase, what an idiot, to describe someone who wasn't serving his coffee fast enough or driving fast enough in his lane. And I remember distinctly as he was tailgating somebody on a highway, I thought, I am tired of spending time around you because I do not want to get infected with this sense of how you're so much better than everybody and you're impatient with their deficiencies. And I don't want to let that infect me. And so when we are, the social contract is accommodate that not everybody is perfect. And also grant yourself some grace that you're not perfect either. And it's perfectly all right to own up to mistakes and to apologize for slights that you may or may not have done intentionally. But when you act in good faith, when you accept that each of us has different skills and not everybody needs to be perfect at everything, that elasticity, that accommodation is a very attractive trait. And I want to return to sort of my professional background. As like I say, I was in the persuasion business. And can I tell you, rule one that you discover is you can't talk somebody into something if they don't want to be talked into it, right? Because if they want something, then any excuse will do. Right? Well, this Mercedes-Benz is very safe. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
A lot of cars are safe. Okay. But if they don't want to do something, any excuse will do. And so the number one way to persuade somebody to your way of thinking is they have to like you. They have to want to be persuaded. And the fastest way to make them like you is to like them, but you must grant that we are all imperfect and we are all in this together. You know, here's something that I'm trying more and more to do personally lately when it comes to telling stories. Underlying every story, I want to reassure people they're not alone. And because people's fear of, have you ever noticed that people that brag a lot, what they're really doing is they're betraying the fact that they want to be accepted. They don't think that they're just being themselves is enough. They've got a kind of weird imposter syndrome. Like they don't think it's enough to just be themselves. So they put on airs and they tell a false story or they embellish their own stories out of fear that they won't be accepted. And when you remind people that they're not alone, when you signal to them that there's acceptance here, or we'll take you for your talents, whatever they may be, they tend to mimic back that behavior. You will, in any organization, it eventually becomes a reflection of the top person's values.
Mhm.
And so it becomes really, really important that in order for a group to cohere as a team, that the top person must offer that as an object lesson, that every day is about making people feel like they are a valued member of a team. I want to go off a little bit on that. I told a story recently in one of my videos about Herb Brooks, the coach of the 1980 U.S. National Olympic hockey team in the United States.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was the circumstances of that particular team, the 1980 men's Olympic hockey team, was that they were amateurs playing against essentially professionals. Back then, the Olympics were quote unquote an amateur sport. You couldn't qualify for the Olympics unless you were an amateur. And so the American team was always college kids who hadn't yet made any money off hockey. And Herb got a lot of heat for not picking the best players. Like they kept saying, Herb, you're leaving guys on the bench that are better than these people. He goes, I don't want the best players. I want the right players. And in his mind, he was never going to beat the Soviets on talent. They were a formidable engine. These people had played together for years. They were the best the Soviet Union can offer. They were on paper, they were amateurs, but really they were paid to play hockey. And he knew he couldn't beat them on talent. The only way he could beat them was by not playing the same game they're used to playing. They had to play an extreme team version of hockey. And in order to play a team version of hockey, he wanted people that were gifted at teamwork. And what a brilliant insight. I'm not picking the best players, I'm picking the right players. And Eventually, he persuaded them. I got to tell you, fellas, the only way you're going to win this is you have to be willing to die for each other. And that's who they were as people. I had the good fortune to meet Mike Ruzioni, who captain of that team. And he did this speech at an organization I was at. It was so incredibly beautiful and lyrical to listen to it. But I do have to say, I got to give him some credit. He was a beautiful storyteller, because everything that I just described about the kind of people that Herb Brooks wanted, boy, it's not an accident that he was the captain, because that was his thing, was I would rather die than let these people down. It just came out of him, and it made him a great leader. You know, there's by the way, you're gonna have to stop me because I'm just gonna keep going.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna stop you just for a second, just because of him, because we are running low on time. But for those of you who weren't either around at that time or haven't had a chance to see even one of the movies like Miracle on Ice, one of the things that he did, you want to talk about a team, is when they won the gold, probably one of the most heartwarming things is he asked for the entire team to come on the podium, and he waved everybody up because he was not going to be there himself accepting it for the team. And somehow the real miracle is of this whole thing is somehow that entire team of like 25 guys, I don't know how many were, they all somehow fit on that one podium. They all were able to get on a podium that was made for one person to stand on. And they all got onto the gold part of the podium and celebrated together. And he was not about to have it where he was receiving it for the team, but the entire team was to receive their reward. And, you know, in reflection, you know, what a great story that whole is, and bringing it up. But, you know, when you look at that, the gift of teamwork, we're struggling a lot within our industry, as we have in the past. Sometimes we look at this thing as, you know, it was so much easier then. No, there were their own challenges then. There are challenges now, but I think everything that you've been talking about, Neal, and we are getting close to the end of our time, but the thing that you've been talking about, I think the commonality thread here is finding a way to connect with others, to not assume others are going to want to have to come to connect to you, but it's your job as a leader is to try to unearth, how do you relate? How do you get people to relate to one another? How do you look at bringing them together? That's really a leader's role. And in your experience, just sort of ending with this, in your experience, where have, you know, and I'm not the perfect softball for you by any means, but where have you found with your business experience of things when you've been leading, where you've made the greatest connections with your teams?
Well, there's, first of all, there's the mission. What is the mission here? Are we trying to do something worthwhile, or are we just here to get rich? And I've always found that people's psychic needs need to be met before their financial needs. Like, that you can pay somebody a lot of money, but they'll give you a half effort, and eventually they'll be very unsatisfied with just the money. And so much of it just feels to me like so much of today is 18th century carrots and sticks, you know, where we're saying people, you reward them by promising them fortunes, and you punish them for their small failures. When in fact, you know, great organizations tend to make a lot of mistakes and accept that with mistakes comes learning. And so when you've got a vision, as long as you say, okay, this is what we're trying to do, and the reason we want to do it is because it will have this kind of effect of goodness on the world in general and our community in particular. If you agree with that, then we'll get there step by step. And yeah, mistakes are going to happen, but as long as we keep our eyes on that's really what the mission is here, the money will eventually show up. And when we have this as a mission, that we're trying to do good things, that we're trying to help people out, and let's say, for example, that I knew that one of my staff was very, very nervous speaker. She was quite nervous in front of a room. And, it's understandable. But I said, listen, I just want you to do one thing. You got to focus not on them or not on yourself and not how you're doing. Focus entirely on, here is how I'm trying to help you today. If you can just stay focused on, here is how I'm trying to help you. Your nerves won't matter. They won't give a dang. They won't care if you're nervous and flustered. As long as they perceive that you're trying to help, they'll grant you a lot of latitude and a lot of grace. So my biggest successes in any kind of communication has always been, let's stay focused on how you're trying to help. And you'll get there.
And it's a wonderful thing to end with, because we talked about that the whole way through this, from the very beginning of your conversation, where you're talking about how your father had sort of perception, strong ethics, and his response back to you that when you were being put in bed and he came to you and he was like, don't believe what they're saying out there. What you saw today is how people really are, which to me is moving alone in those words from your father. But it's about the fact that the connections that we have, the intention, trying, when you talked about Pixar, and it's not about that the person is the hero, but it's the ones who are trying to get there, the people who are on the journey. They're the ones who are trying to get there. Those are the ones who relate. And then you look at the connection from teamwork to togetherness, to finding that common link, to even like the miracle on ice. All these have the similar underlying theme. And that is the connection of trying, putting the right effort forward. I'd rather hire someone on my team any day who I think would weave into our culture and be able to help all of us move forward than the person who has their master's degree, 25 years of experience, blah, 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 has this huge resume, but honestly, it's got to be her way or the highway. Every day of the week, I'm going to go for the individual who will work with us and we will work with them. So Neal, for our time, we unfortunately are at our conclusion. And I want to thank you greatly. This is, you could tell just, from the conversation, I could just go on for another hour or so with you, and I wouldn't, you've been so amazingly generous with your time. So I'd like to thank you, and maybe we can have you come back at some other time if you're up for that too.
Oh, you betcha. Absolutely, Tony. No problem.
This has been a great conversation. For those of you who have seen, there's been a little chat going on because I know that we want to give people their certificates. Send your email to us. We'll make sure you get your certificates. Hopefully that all came through from those technical issues. Hopefully you've been able to take some things out of this. If for any reason you missed it, we are going to have a replay that'll go out next week. We'll send it out to everybody, including Neal himself. In our chat too, we have put out Neal's URL. I would highly advise all of you to not only to view, but also to share. They're just very, they're profound. Your storytelling is profound. I look forward to your future ones too. Not to put too much pressure on you, but I really do. And I want to say that it's been a great experience. So for everybody here at Inspire Care 360, thank you so much, Neal, for your time today.
You betcha.
And I want to thank the effort of obviously Nicole as well as Sarah in the background. We have different people who are saying thank you to. And if you do want to send us some questions, I know we've unfortunately run out of time, but we can always get some over to Neal. And if you wouldn't mind maybe answering a few of them, we'd like to get back to the people out there who've been listening across the country. But thank you so much, Neal. And from everybody at Inspire Care 360, thank you very much for joining us for our webinar executive pop-up series. And we will talk to you all real soon. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks so much, Neal.
Cheers.
Cheers.